Hello friends, I am Hardeep Singh from Gati Group of Classes. Welcomes you on our YouTube channel. Guys, this video also made in Hindi language also. You can visit our channel. The link will be given in the description. You can click over there and you can reach to the Hindi language of this video. So guys, we have a topic that is the making of global world, and this is the lecture 2 of that topic. So we are going to start a topic the 19th century, that is from 1815 to 1914. So let's see that what are the topics or the subtopics we are going to be cover in this video. The first of all, the topic is the 19th century, and the subtopics are a world economy takes shape, role of technology, late 19th century colonialism, and rinderpest or the cattle plague. So these are the four topics we are going to cover in this video, and the rest of the subtopics of this topic 19th century will be covered in the next video. So let's start without wasting any time. So here is the introduction. So in the 19th century, a dramatic factors has been changed the society. Like many of the political, economical, social, cultural, and technological factors are responsible, which has been changed or reshaped the external relation, which has been changed the society. So let's see that what are the type of flows. There are three types of flows in the economy. The first one is the flow of the trade, second is flow of labor, and the third is flow of capital. So let's explain them. Uh, the flow of the trade. If we are going to talk about the trade, obviously trade and goods. Obviously, only one thing, the goods can be import or export within the countries or within the continents. So we are talking about the time period of 19th century when there was a rapid speed in the trade or in the globalization. They just like imported and exported the things from one country to another country, and even from one continent to another continent. For example, if we are taking the example of England, like if they have started machine made cotton pieces, like machine made cloths to sell in our own country, that is India, and even in many of the other countries, and they just have been looted us, like they have taken the raw material from us and they just sold their ready material to us. And the next is the flow of the labor. So why the people move from one place to another place? That is only in one condition, that is in search of employment. For example, 50 million people, they just left Europe. Why? Just for the search of employment, just to for the first search of work. And they left for America and Australia because there was not that much of population which was at that time in Europe. So it included also indentured labor. The topic of the indentured labor we will cover in the next video, but now we are going to tell you that indentured labor, those were working, those can be like they can be divided, or they can be caused by the different type of things those who had been told at that time to them, and they employed in the plantation, mines, and even in the road and railway construction projects. Now the next is the flow of the capital. Movement of capital was very for short term and as well as for the long term investment. If we are talking over here about the capital, it simple means that is money. You people should remember this thing in your mind, that capital means money. Many of the rich people like America and England, they just start investing their money in the many of the other part of the world, and they just because they want some of the profit from there. All the flows, they are likely they interconnected to with each other, but sometimes we can see that one of the flow that can be broken as labor migration. This is the most affected flow that can be broken anytime, because if the population is that much of the level in the outside or in the foreign countries, then they will restrict the people that they are not allowed to come in our country. But the other two flows, the goods and the capitals, they will be continued for everyone and for every time. So the next topic is the world economy takes shape. Traditionally, if we are talking about the earlier time period, at that time, all the countries likely to be self-sufficient. They just don't want to import the like food, corn from the other places or from the other countries. But if we are talking about 19th century, at that time Britain was not in the condition that they can be self-sufficient. If they will try to become self-sufficient, that means that the living standard, because the prices will be high at that time and many of the social conflict will be there, and the already a population growth is going on. So the like food grains, those were in the demand at that time in Britain. How the urban center expanded, industry grew, so the demand for the agriculture products it went up. So that they started to import the corns from the other countries into their Britain. But due to the pressure of landlords, government have to restrict the import of corn by the various laws such as the corn law. But after some time, that corn law that has been scrapped or that has been stopped, that it will not, like we will not continue this corn laws. Now, what was the reason? What were the reasons that the corn laws has been scrapped? What was the reason? Actually, at the time of 1816, there was a bad harvest. At where? In Britain, obviously. So the food prices they just increased rapidly. But it was a problem to the common people, and the industrial workers they just started demanding higher wages due to higher prices, because they just need to expand their money. So they just started, and there were many of the food rights. Like there were just rights for the food, like because people they just want some food, but on a low cost. But that was not possible at that time in Britain. So government just restricted that laws. They just demolished that corn laws, and these were the reasons that government they just scrapped corn laws. Now, what were the impact of scrapping corn laws? First of all, now corn can be imported from the other countries. So, it will be more cheaply than if they will produce that corn in their own country. So, it was better to import from the other countries. British agriculturist was unable to compete with imports because it obviously if something is going to be in loss for me, then I will not do that thing. Vast area of land now that was like left uncultivated. Thousands of men and women they were just thrown out of their work. Why? What was the reason? Because if there is no business, then how the people will get the money? Those are working over there. So they just thrown out from their work. Now, the people those were like thrown out, now they just started to migrate from the that area to the cities and in and overseas. Like they just move from one continent to another continent just in the search of work. But due to fall of prices, the consumption of food grains that was also rose in the Britain, and consumption also rose just because of one reason, that is increase in income. Because now Britain has started to import the corns or the food grains from the other countries. And even due to low prices and the high income of the people, now demand exceeds than supply. Now supply was less, but demand was higher. So other countries like Russia, America, Australia, and many of the Eastern European countries, they started to exporting their food grains to the Britain. Now the next topic is a role of technology. It is a very important topic. How technology helped in the development? This is the question that we have to answer. Now, what was the like that technology did that it development it helps? Innovations, many of the innovations like railways, steam engine, ships, telegraph, these all were like changes in the 19th century world. These were the new innovations that has been started at that time. But many of the factors were responsible for this. For example, colonization. What is the colonization? That we already know. That colonization is when a rich country, when a developed country is ruling over the another country for their own sakes. So now they started the transport, faster railways, lighter wagons, larger ships, only to increase their trade, only to increase their incomes. Okay? So let's take an example of meat. Example, till 1870s, meat like was it was shipped from the to Europe by the Americans, but in the form of live animals, and then they were slaughtered into Europe. But live animals, those were many of the type of the laws over there, like they cover a lot of space, ship space, and also some of them they just died in the way, and they fell ill and lost weight, become unfit to eat. So that was likely to be a very problematic to them. So the price was meat was very high. In the poor people now they were not even they cannot afford that things in their food due to high prices. Demand and production, those both were very low at that time. But the invention of the refrigerator ships. Now this is the main important thing over here. That is the refrigerated ships. So made it possible to transport meat from one region to another region. But how? What was the innovation did? What was the reason that they did? So now animals, those were earlier slaughtered in the Europe. Now they were slaughtered in America, Australia, and New Zealand. And then they were transported to Europe as frozen meat. And what were the advantages of invention of these ships? First of all, that reduced the shipping cost. And this was the reason that the meat prices they just fell down in the Europe. And now poor people also can afford this, but not all, but few. They can now add many of the things such as meat, butter, eggs. They can add those things in their food materials. Better living condition, they promoted social peace. Now the people also started to support their imperialism. They supported their people, they supported their kings, even they supported their government just because they are getting low low rate things. Now let's talk about the late 19th century. The process of globalization. We already discussed that what is globalization, that is interlinking of the different countries, but through trade. Now, obviously, we know that if someone is going to trade with the another countries, there it will help them to like arise in their economic money. But that also makes one more thing, that is the darker side of this process, that was colonization. Now, colonialism. We already know that the domination of the one stronger country over the another weak country. So what were the major impacts of the colonialism? Most of the colonies, now most of the countries, they just lost their political freedom. And many of the changes were there. In 1885, like many of the European powers, now they met in Berlin and they just divided up full of the Africa in between them. Why? What was the reason? Because Britain and France, now they were the new territories, those has been expanded their territories, even the overseas in the late 19th century. Belgium and Germany, they became the new colonial powers. Those also started to rule over the another countries. US, that was already a colonial power in 1890s, and they also just take over many of the other colonies or many of the other countries, those were earlier held by Spain, but now those were taken by the US. Now the topic is rinderpest or the cattle plague. This is the important topic. Rinderpest is a plague, just like as coronavirus. Coronavirus is to the man, to the humankind, but that rinderpest is for the cattle. In 1890s, rinderpest was the disease which affected Africa, and it had a great impact on the people's livelihood and the local economy. When the Europeans arrived in Africa, they found that people were not ready to work as the laborers. But what was the reason? There were only two reasons, because they were having that much of land that they don't need to work on the wages. And even then, the population was not that too much. And even there were two main of the occupations. The one was the agriculture and the second was animal rearing. If I do have that much of land, I will also not work. That I know. And but they were self-sufficient at that time. But in late 19th century, Africa, there were few of the consumer goods. Those were actually they need to buy. But Europeans, those came to Africa. Now they just want to start their plantation and even their mines. But it was not possible till the people of Africa will not ready to do work on the wages. So now they just started to use some of the methods to recruit and retain labor. Heavy taxes were imposed on the people so that it was only possible to pay just if they are working on mines for the money. And the next thing is inheritance laws. That also has been changed at that time because like we already know that what is the meaning of inheritance. So one member of the family was allowed to take the land of the father, but the rest of the other two brothers or three brothers, whatsoever they have taken, they all have to work in the labor market. And even the mine workers, they were just enclosed. They have to remain over only on those countries or only on those places where they were allowed to. What were the major impacts of the rinderpest? So rinderpest arrived in Africa in late 1880s, that we already know, and within 2 years it spread in the whole of the continent, and even within the 5 years it reached to the Cape Town. Cape Town. The germs of the disease now they were carried by infected cattle. Those were imported from the Britain to feed the Italian soldiers. Those were living in the Eastern Africa. The rinderpest, like they just killed 90% of the cattle, which was the main occupation, or the animal rearing was the main occupation at that time of the African people. But it obviously it lost their livelihood, so they just have to work in the mines and they just have to work as the laborer. The loss of the cattle, that was the severe impact on their life. Planters, mine owners, colonial government, they just now successfully monopolized. How? Because whatever the sources, whatever the animals they just left, they just started to taken by the government. And it forces to the Africans to work in the labor market. Now control over the scarce resources, that was in the under the European colonizers. So it was very helpful for them, for the Europeans to take over the Africa. So this was the topic that we will do in this video. So guys, if you like the video, then please like it, share it among their friends, and subscribe our channel, as well as hit the like button and hit the bell icon so you can get every update on time. Thank you very much, guys. Bye bye, everyone.